There's 4 O's in there. And welcome to our newest edition of the What a Disaster podcast, where we usually talk about and discuss. I do like that because it is just really drives the point home that we are using words from our mouths to each other.
I'm not going to make any excuses. I spent a lot of time in this outline, but not a lot of time on the intro.
Okay, look, just shut up. Today we're going to do part 2 of the Costa Concordia cruise ship disaster. We got Christopher again.
Hi.
We got Liz as usual.
Hi.
And Richard died in a car accident, but luckily we were able to retrieve his corpse and reanimate it.
We did that thing. We scanned his memory and we put it into a clone so Richard feels like he's still Richard and he has the consciousness, but the actual consciousness is gone forever.
Right. I was surprised that he took so well to the clone body that looks nothing like him.
Yeah. That makes sense. I was wondering why it was so much prettier. Thanks, guys, for the upgrade.
Yeah. You feel like you cheated death.
Oh, yeah. And, and not having consciousness, perfect. What a relief.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Okay. Well, I'll get the formalities out of the way here. If you're listening to this and you want to do more than listen, you want to talk to us too, you can feel free to chat with us on various platforms. We're Podwad on the Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can, subscribe to us, of course, on our whatever podcast platform you're using. Definitely review us. Or you could even give us a text message or give us a call at 209-781-9113.
It's a good song.
It is a good song. It's my jam. I listen to it every day on my way to work. Don't. Oh, God. Fine.
I can see you. Yeah.
Fine. There, my monitor. He moved my monitor down.
What an
so
upgrade.
I have to look at him.
This one
Eye contact.
brighter.
Really uncomfortable.
Strange.
So this is our 48th episode of our show. Was it 48 last time, or is it 40? Did you actually update that this time?
I incremented it one.
Okay, he got it. He did it.
I caught that, yeah.
We're going to pick up where we left off last week. We kind of gave you the primer on the Costa Concordia business. We got up to the point where they actually wiped out.
Yeah, it was on Friday, January 13th. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Wait, it was Friday the 13th last week?
Yeah. So Jason Voorhees was waiting on shore.
Oh, you're talking about in the disaster. Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about?
I don't know. It's Friday, January 13th when the boat
where we last
crashed.
Left off, Friday, January 13th, 2012 at 10:58 p.m. Why didn't you just read it off the paper?
Because I didn't like it.
Oh, the Surfaris?
The Surfaris.
But it looks like
the Hurricanes. It wasn't too far.
It looks like the Beach Boys did actually do it once.
Of course they did.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
I was wrong. Anyway, Jason Voorhees is waiting on shore with his unrealistically sharp machete, and he's going to chop up any survivors, I think is the plan.
Yeah.
I think it's, oh God, Richard, with these puns. I think it's fair to say that we're going to spend today doing a deep dive. And of course, he calls out the pun, both figuratively and kind of literally, as we discuss the sinking and recovery of the Costa Concordia. This is the worst. You wrote this paragraph and you were like, I'm proud of this.
I wrote that paragraph and I laughed so hard I had to take a break.
You know what? I believe it. I believe it. Okay, well, we got through the intro.
Yeah, that was painful.
I'm hurt.
You all right? You really make it?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
So I think we kind of left off when the captain called the abandoned ship order. The passenger footage documentary couples together all of these different experiences from around the ship. And one of them is a couple that returns to their stateroom and the power's off. You can't see anything. It's just dark. In this particular cell phone video, you see the guy and his wife walk back to their stateroom and they open the door. And he goes, "Look at that. How strange." And then the wife goes, "Weird. There must be a ghost in here." And there's dust rising vertically from the floor, like just floating up into the air. And I'm really curious, why is it doing that? And there's no explanation. I couldn't look it up. It's just, you can see it on the camera just rising toward the ceiling of the stateroom. And there's not a huge list to the ship yet, so there's no like gravitational pull that I think would be pulling it, but it was very interesting.
I have a theory.
I do too. I'll let Chris go first.
Okay.
I know nothing about science. My theory is that there's water entering the ship and it's displacing air and it's creating a pressure differential that's creating a little vacuum. It's sucking stuff up.
100% what I was going to say. Like when you turn on your shower and the curtain gets like sucked in to the
Yeah.
shower.
I was going to say the same thing. That was the water filling in. So yeah, we're
I
on the
guess we
same
figured
page.
it out.
Cool.
We're all boat scientists as far as I can
See,
tell.
now I'm glad I
We
mentioned
solved it.
Dust scientists.
3/4 of the
very
people that have
interested.
no idea what's going on agree,
Yeah.
and therefore it is true. That is science.
Absolutely. It's an official stance of the What Disaster podcast that dust rises when water displaces it.
But also, there was a ghost in there too.
Yeah, for sure, ghosts. Yeah,
Absolutely haunted.
All right, so
water ghosts that got sucked into the ship, and they're trying to get out. And,
Called Spielberg.
yep, they got attached to the dust.
Spirit of Poseidon's children. So after the abandoned ship order is called, everybody who hasn't already been heading for the lifeboats heads for the lifeboats. In particular, on the ship, they were designed to accommodate angles of up to 20 degrees, which, of course, the Concordia soundly surpassed, especially the second time it hit shore and listed very, very rapidly. Though there was no muster station drill that would have at least shown people where they were supposed to go to get on their lifeboats had ever happened, the drill wouldn't really have accounted for the loss of half the lifeboats due to the angle of the ship.
I feel like you could just like get on one of the lifeboats and then slide down the ship on the lifeboat.
It would tumble. It would tumble.
Yeah, it would roll.
So how many degrees are we talking about here? Like what kind of angle is the ship at when all this is happening?
Well, when it hits the first rock, it kind of tilts just a little bit to one side, and it doesn't go back the way it's supposed to go back, like it usually does, so people kind of know something's off. And it drifts out and it turns in the waves and drifts back towards shore, where it hits the rocks again. And the second time it hits the rocks, it flips over onto the other side, opposite of the way it was listing before, but very, very rapidly, completely 90 degrees, like on its
Completely
side.
90
Yes.
degrees.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. This thing was on its side.
Yes.
So it's on its side. Okay.
Scatino claimed during his trial that at this point, when he went up to observe the situation, he was knocked off balance right into a lifeboat. Gosh dang it. And there is convincing but admittedly low quality and thus unproven passenger cell phone footage of a very Scatino-like figure calmly leaning against the ship railings as he waits for a lifeboat.
And this is all 30 minutes after he said abandoned ship.
Yeah.
They were like the bridge was already a ghost town. Everybody who worked there was already on lifeboats. getting out.
He waited 30 minutes after he said abandoned ship. What
Yeah.
more can you ask for?
Exactly. Like what good was he gonna do on this ship where he knows everything and is in charge?
And is supposed to give orders. And of course, had he given the orders when he was supposed to, this wouldn't have been so bad because people would have had an extra hour to get off, but he didn't. He just kind of pretended everything was fine to try to save face, and it was not fine, and it made everything a lot worse.
There's some great audio of like the Coast Guard in the helicopter, and they were just chatting with each other, trying to find the ship, and they were like just going back and forth. And they're actually having a really difficult time finding the ship because there's a bunch of other ships in the ocean as well.
You watch them zoom out onto
Yeah.
these other ships, like, is that it? Like, no, that's not it. It's a lot bigger.
If you want to read this with me, Greg, I'll start it off for you. Is that it?
No, it's a bigger.
It must be behind here somewhere.
There it is. Look there. Shit, it sunk. Son of a bitch.
Bloody hell!
What a mess. It's a properly sunk.
This is the direct
We're going
translation.
into the ship now. Get closer.
Good accent.
Hey, you're welcome.
So, unfortunately, this is also the point where they identify
Oh no.
something
Come
warm
on.
floating in the water.
Really? Right before the dead people, I'm making jokes?
Oh, yeah. There's dead people all over this.
Fuck you guys.
Well,
It's not your fault. You didn't leave the ship. You didn't abandon
That's true. I
ship.
didn't
well,
hop
they
into
thought
a
he was
lifeboat
alive
and
at
head
first,
off.
and they tried to get to him, but they realized pretty quickly that he was not.
So now, how many people died?
33,
33?
counting a rescue driver, but 32
Okay.
on the ship as
No,
it sank.
33 is it's all fault of that captain. He
Yep.
has
Yes.
33 deaths on him.
Yes, he does. We
Okay.
have some rescue operations underway at this point, of course, because now the Coast Guard knows where the ship is and knows how bad the situation has truly become. There were still tons of people aboard the ship, and the Coast Guard was actually shocked and commented that they couldn't believe their eyes seeing how many people were in infrared. You can see them trying to climb down the ladder, like sideways down the hall into the water.
Which pretty much sets the tone for how the Coast Guard approaches this moving forward.
They are stunned. Of course, being on board is not safe. Besides the nearly impossible angle to walk down the hallways, the decks were described as having been painted with this polyester material that made it impossible to gain purchase. and passengers and crew had to hold on to each other and help each other up, and everyone was falling and helping each other back to their feet, which is strangely beautiful.
It's a nightmare when you think about it.
I
You're
know,
like trying to
but-
escape and you can't because you're sliding around.
The way that one of the dancers talks about how people just kept grabbing her and pulling her back up to her feet as she's scrambling to get, because she was in charge of the lifeboat, and she's scrambling to get to the right place. And then there was another dancer who was dating a ship's engineer, and the engineer came up and told his girlfriend, the dancer, that things were actually really bad earlier in the night, and she was one of the first to find out because of it. But she says that
Mothers were chucking their babies at me boyfriend. He had like 3 babies in his arms and he didn't know where to put them.
even better.
Well, that dancer knows how to pick them, I
Oh, yeah.
guess.
Yeah,
Like,
seriously.
Rob Gronkowski over here,
It's like
just
some log-armed.
catching one hand catching baby
Yeah,
heads.
just chucking babies at the man. People are taking him. He's taking them. I mean, if he's babysitting, shit, get on the promenade deck, get some drinks.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Oh wait,
like,
no,
just
they're
holding-
not giving drinks away. They're just cleaning the fucking bar.
Could you imagine holding all these babies and getting on a lifeboat? Like, I don't even know whose these are.
I have a child.
I have a child.
I feel great.
I had this moment where I hadn't thought about James Cameron's Titanic in probably a year,
A week.
in a week.
I think about it literally every day.
But I was brushing my teeth or like doing something in the bathroom mirror, and I was like,
Finally.
Cal forced his way onto a lifeboat with a child in his arms that he stole from someone and then killed himself after the Wall Street collapse. Like, what a fucking asshole. And I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
a year after seeing this movie,
So,
unprompted.
just to rewind a little bit for Chris, like for how much he thinks about Titanic, he has that like the Titanic cover art where it's Jack and what's her name over the
Rose?
Rose.
Yeah, Jack and Rose over the ship. He's got a mirror of that, but the Rose head is missing, so that when he wakes up, his head is where Rose's head would be in the mirror.
Yep.
Yep.
Every morning.
Every
I'm
morning,
the king of
he's
the
in
world.
Jack's embrace.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Things continue to get worse.
Things continue to get worse. As we mentioned before, the ship comes to rest on its side on a rock shelf, an underwater rock shelf, which is the reason it hit that in the first place, and that's why we're in the situation we're in. So it comes back to this rock shelf, and it's just kind of hovering there. And everybody on board doesn't, of course, know the underwater topography, and are kind of just expecting the ship to slip off of the rock and fall into the water. And most are just expecting that they're not going to make it out.
So how deep is this channel? Could that have happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
During the salvage operation, they were really worried that they were going to knock it loose and knock it into the water. And then that would have been devastating because everything in that boat would have gone into the water and just ruined the like ecology. It was a real
Yes.
concern.
It's very delicately balanced on this rock shelf. Many
why-
people jumped off the ship and swam for the shore, and a lot of them were pulled out by the villagers who lived on Giglio. And also, these villagers welcomed people into their homes. They took care of them. Nobody knew where they were. Nobody, like, this wasn't on the cruise itinerary, so, like, they didn't even know what the name of the island was, or some of them didn't even... I think they knew they weren't on the mainland, but they just weren't sure what they were doing.
They knew they weren't on the boat anymore. They're like, this
Like,
this
we're not on
feels
the ship
different.
anymore.
Yeah.
So, a dancer with a horrible fear of water was among the swimmers that jumped off of the ship and survived the swim. He recalls being told by people still aboard not to look back as he swam, and he said that, like the Titanic, there was a deep, deep echo noise of metal breaking apart, and that will never leave him, he said. Another dancer named Rose,
Yep.
because, of course, climbs freehand by her fingertips to the highest point of the ship that she can reach, where she waits an agonizing hour for rescue helicopters to eventually notice her and another person there waiting with her by the strobes of their life vests.
I was thinking, like, you know how those ships usually have those climbing walls? She totally got in shape, like climbing on the deck during her breaks, and now she finally got to use it.
Do we know? I'm very curious about details that we might not have on hand about like how far did they have to swim? What was the water
What was
temperature?
it, Liz, 2 miles?
It wasn't 2 miles. It might have been a mile. It was the middle of winter, so the water was freezing and people were dying of hypothermia as they tried to swim. And some would get, like, as the ship was sinking, it created this underwater vortex that pulled a lot of people
Yeah,
under
kind of
as
an
well.
undertow type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Which
like
would have
Titanic.
been 1,000 times worse had it not been resting on that rock shelf.
Yes.
So a lot of people did live and wouldn't have. It would have been devastating. As far
Well,
as
if it hadn't been
casualties.
for the rock shelf, they wouldn't have been sinking at all. So we're gonna.
He went back to it though. If we hit the rock shelf and he goes out into deeper water. Had he not have brought the boat back to that rock shelf, he would have sunk out in the
it
deeper
would've been
water,
way
and it would have been fucked.
I want to say something about that though, because there is this video of the bridge that you can watch and you can see what they say. And Scatino said in court that he was the one that activated bow thrusters, which are basically these very low energy, like
Lasers?
no,
Oh.
they
Fireballs?
They move the ship in a
Oh.
direction, but not very fast and not very effectively. But he claims that he went and activated those and thus guided the ship back to
Oh,
port.
are they like for getting closer to the dock when they're?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
like in Star Trek when the warp drive's broken.
However,
No,
and I'm
that's
not
the
sure whether
impulse
this
drive,
is...
Richard. Don't be ridiculous.
Sorry, Greg.
I don't know if that's true.
I think it is. I think you're right. You're right.
So I don't know whether this was brought up in court, but during the video, you can hear him say, "We are now drifting towards shore. What depth are we at here?" And this refutes the bow thruster theory because he literally says we're drifting
Yeah.
in his voice. So
Uncontrolled.
And I take back what I said earlier, because when he comes back towards the rock shelf, you did say it listed it in the other direction, and that's when it hit the 90-degree angle. It probably would have been a lot easier to control out in the water because it wasn't listing. It was just damaged. So it was
Yes.
sinking very slow, and they probably could have sealed off some compartments and kept things going.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, either way, he made a lot of bad decisions. I don't think anybody's refuting that.
No, this guy's one big bad decision.
Well, this is
Well,
why I'm confused, because we're talking about a mile, but in all the pictures I've seen,
it's right there. It's
there's-
really close.
Yeah. So
I don't think it was...
I feel like the documentary we watched said it was about a mile offshore. Not a lot of people swam, but yeah, you see that little island right there. It's really close. Maybe you couldn't get up there. Maybe it was all coral and like you couldn't get through.
There are docks.
I mean, if
that
I
they
had
were
the choice
getting
between
to.
swimming through some coral or getting murdered to death by a ship that's sinking, I'm going to risk the coral.
I think
Yeah.
most of the people who swam survived. To be honest with you, I think most of the casualties were people who were trapped on the boat or in elevators. and stuff.
yeah.
I mean, it was February. I wouldn't want to be in that water at all. to
I
begin
But
swim
it's also
terribly.
Italy. I don't know how cold does like Italy get in winter.
I was
How
there
cold does the
in-
water get?
I was there in February on the island of Sardinia. It was about
Why don't you just Google the temperature?
it was about 43 degrees when I was there, and it
Wow.
does so it gets pretty cold. It was really cold because it was windy. It felt terrible. I definitely would not have wanted to get in that water. It would have been pretty freaking cold.
Another thing I wasn't able to find a ton of information about, but it was definitely out there, was this bit about the anchor. After he says that we're drifting toward the shore, what depth are we at? We're about at 100 meters here. Then he says, okay, well, we have to see if we can make it with the length of the anchor chain. Let's drift a bit more into shallow waters, then drop the anchor. At worst, we'll sit on the seabed. Let's just wait and see. So from what I hear, or from what I've seen, it sounds like they just way over deployed the anchor chain, so it was just like pointless. The anchor was on its side when they found it. It wasn't locked into anything. And it said that if they had effectively done it, that would have helped and it would have
prevented the
prevented the list. So they fucked up the anchor, just like they fucked up everything else that night.
They didn't do everything right. is
They
what I'm
didn't do
hearing.
hardly anything right.
At this
Yeah.
point, there's a rope ladder that's been thrown over the hull, and now the ship's completely sideways, and people are using that rope ladder to try to get out. Some people are still trapped in what was it, like the main ballroom area, and they're using the rope ladder to get out of there.
Well, yeah, there were people that got caught in the middle when they were told to run from one side. They were on the one side with the lifeboats, and they couldn't get those lifeboats down, so they were told to run across the ship to the other side, and that's where a lot of people died.
So as
too.
much as the captain fucked up, the Coast Guard was really on their game in this. They were there. They rescued a lot of people. They saved a
did.
lot of lives.
What
And they-
was America's Navy doing this whole time?
not being in Italy?
Yeah, not helping people, amassing lots of money.
Not being a global force for good? Or
Yeah, imagine that.
The rope ladder that we were just talking about was what the Coast Guard saw and commented that they were so amazed to see. It's just like white lights. The people were white lights, and this infrared footage just crawling down the side of the ship. It was pretty incredible.
I want to watch some of this documentary footage after we're done with all this.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting stuff.
For those that don't know, I'm going into this completely blind. I mean, I knew about it obviously when it happened, but I was told not to.
We
not
gave
to
you
do
a
any
reading
research.
list, and you said anything with pictures, and I said no, and you said, well, then you can eat it.
That is 100%. And then I actually force-fed him a couple of pages of the first book he suggested.
I did a coloring book on the incident, but that's the extent of my knowledge.
Beautiful work, though.
I saw on TV. Thank you.
I like the way you blended your purples.
Thank you. I always have a problem with coloring books because I want to use all my colors.
Yeah,
So
I mean, sometimes
you get a scene that's like just grays and blues.
there's a lot of whites and blues on that.
Yeah.
You get that like 85 box of crayons, and you're like, man, I just really want to use this new color, the sparkly neon green.
So I'm aware that like the life jackets on the Costa Concordia were not rainbow printed, but
They were not.
I had 85 colors.
Artistic.
You got to
license.
use them. You got to get all 85 colors on a page. Otherwise, what's the point of having them? Plus, they're like, then you pull out one of your colors and it's way more worn down than the other ones.
Yep.
Then you just have to use all the other ones a lot
Yep.
more, and your pictures start to get off balance. It's not great.
Stupid white crayon.
We're gonna go sharpen some crayons, and when we get back, we are going to talk about the Costa Concordia. Do you guys know what that is? Costa Concordia.
Never heard of it.
Okay, we're gonna bash the captain, and we are gonna talk about that more in just probably like immediately. Really,
Yeah, it probably does like right now.
you won't even notice.
I didn't notice.
He's known in Italy as Captain Coward, accused of showing off while at the wheel of a 112,000-ton cruise liner and ultimately causing it to sink. 18 months on, as Francesco Schettino starts his trial, this is what's become of the Costa Concordia, the most expensive accident in maritime history and the scene of 32 deaths. Captain Schettino is accused of causing this shipwreck and then abandoning it, as well as multiple manslaughter. Hopefully this trial will reveal exactly why such a sophisticated ship hit the jagged rocks, and whether Schettino really did just trip and fall into one of the first lifeboats, as he says, leaving thousands of passengers on board.
This is DeFalco speaking from Livorno. Am I speaking with the commander?
Yes, good evening, Commander DeFalco.
Please tell me your name.
I'm Commander Schettino, Commander.
You mean Schettino? Listen, Schettino. There are people trapped on board. Now you go with your boat under the prow on the starboard side. There's a pilot ladder. You will climb that ladder and go on board. You go on board and then you will tell me how many people are there. Is that clear? I'm recording this conversation, Commander Schettino.
Commander, let me tell you one thing.
Speak up! Put your hand in front of the microphone and speak more loudly. Is that clear?
In this moment, the boat is tipping.
I understand that. Listen, there are people that are coming down the pilot ladder of the prow. You go up that pilot ladder, get on that ship, and tell me how many people are still on board, and what they need. Is that clear? You need to tell me if there are children, women, or people in need of assistance. And tell me the exact number of each of these categories. Is that clear? Listen, Schettino, that you saved yourself from the sea, but I'm going to really do something bad to you. I'm going to make you pay for this. Go on board, expletive.
I think he says fuck. Go on board, fuck.
Commander, please.
No, please. You now get up and go on board. They're telling me that on board there are still...
I am here with the rescue boats. I am here. I'm not going anywhere. I am here.
What are you doing, Commander?
I'm here to coordinate the rescue.
What are you coordinating there? Go on board. Coordinate the rescue from aboard the ship. Are you refusing?
No, I'm not refusing.
Are you refusing to go aboard, Commander? Can you tell me the reason why you are not going?
I'm not going because the other lifeboat is stopped.
You go aboard. It is an order. Don't make any more excuses. You have declared abandoned ship. Now I am in charge. You go on board. Is that clear? Do you hear me? Go, and call me when you are aboard. My air rescue crew is there.
Where are your rescuers?
My air rescue is on the prow. Go. There are already bodies, Schettino.
How many bodies are there?
I don't know. I've heard of one. You are the one who has to tell me not how many there are. Christ!
But you do realize it is dark, and here we can't see anything.
And so what? You want to go home, Schettino? It is dark and you want to go home? Get on that prow of the boat using the pilot ladder and tell me what can be done, how many people there are, and what their needs are. Now!
I'm with my second in command.
So both of you go up then. You and your second go on board now. Is that clear?
Commander, I want to go on board, but it is simply that the other boat here, there are other rescuers. It has stopped and is waiting.
It has been an hour that you have been telling me the same thing. Now go on board. Go on board! And then tell me immediately how many people there are.
Okay, Commander.
Go, immediately.
You won't be surprised to find out that there is no evidence that Scatino ever tried to reboard the ship.
Nor that he knew what starboard was.
Instead, he took a taxi to a local hotel and gave an interview to the local news media in which he claimed he was the last person to abandon ship and that, quote, almost all the passengers were rescued. He looks sweaty.
He's just really confused by all the nautical terms his commander kept throwing at him, I think.
I love it. If you listen to it, he just keeps going like, but it is like, go on board. He's like, you hear me? He's like,
You want to go home?
Man, this guy seems like a real fuck.
Yeah, all he had to
He
do
is.
at this point was go back, get up there. He would have been fine. He would have, and they needed somebody who knew the ship to get on there and tell them what was going on.
At that point, the ship had sunk as much as it was going to
Yeah.
sink until it was lifted out of that area and hauled away for scrap.
People who paid to get on this fucking boat were dying, and he was just like, see ya. I'm
Yeah.
out.
Fuck you, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Who wants tacos?
I kind of do.
Now, what must be the most epically condescending call in the history of the Coast Guard is placed by Gregorio Mario de Falco of Livorno to the cowardly captain who was in his lifeboat at the time.
The cowardly captain.
Cowardly
If
captain.
only he had courage.
I want to know more about this DeFalco because he sounds like an absolute badass.
He
He's
really
probably
does.
like rushed into so many ships before.
So,
None of them were his fault. You can just tell.
Yeah.
from what I could tell, he was definitely like a hero in Italy after all this went down.
Yeah.
But there was some employment situation or some reason he fell into disgrace a little bit later on.
I think he was kind of an asshole.
I think he was kind of
You
an
don't
asshole.
say.
I-
The most exciting thing that happened on any of my cruises was when our captain said, and now we're going to tootle the horn. And blew the horn as we were pulling out, and it was amazing.
Dude, the hard.
Toodle.
Tootle. the
I
horn.
just looked it up though. DeFalco's doing great. He's actually an Italian senator now.
Oh,
Fantastic.
And it says that his order, "Get the fuck back on board," became very popular as a catchphrase. in
That's
Italy.
amazing.
Well, it's very popular.
I
with
hope
me
that was
now.
a political slogan.
I got all the signs.
Vote
fuck back
DeFalco.
on.
Get
Get the fuck on
back
board.
yes.
That's amazing. So not to bring it back to a dark place, but the part that struck me the hardest were there were 4 victims that were found in atrium elevators. That's the really ordinate jade elevators. There were 4 people were trapped in those glass elevators. And another 9 passengers were trapped in other elevators, and they all died. And that's the most terrifying aspect that came out of this, in my opinion. It's like, could you imagine being stuck on those elevators as they just filled slowly with water with a bunch of strangers?
Yeah, like, but where were crew members stopping people from getting onto these
Yeah.
elevators when this happened?
How
Well,
preventable?
the blackout happened 10 minutes after.
Forget the blackout. They hit something that is pretty much shut down the elevator.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's
I
why you
mean,
do
if
that.
this was handled properly, yeah, that
Right.
would have been the case. But it was horribly mishandled.
That's not just Scatino, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
No,
It's just
What kind of like regulations? Because like when an airplane crashes, they like research the shit out of it and everything that went wrong, and then they make sure it'll never ever happen again. Is there anyone who researched this thing and was like, okay, from now on we're locking down the elevators?
Well, there is a full official report, and I couldn't really find specifics, but they claimed that there were some sort of modifications made to Italy's process of having those muster station drills. They were supposed to be within 24 hours of boarding, but I think they need to be right when you get on board.
Who even regulates the cruise ship industry?
Well, we were
Everyone and no one.
We were listening
Coast
to a
Guard?
legal podcast actually that went over this the other day, and it depends. So the ship, in this case, the ship was an Italian ship. It was floating under the Italian flag,
Yeah.
and it was crewed by an Italian crew. So this is all Italy. This is all the regulations. Where it gets complicated is if you have like a boat that's sailing under like the American flag, but it has an Italian crew,
Right.
which happens all the time because frankly, it's cheaper
And it's in,
sometimes to
you
hire
know,
a foreign crew.
The Caribbean, it's in like, Mexico or something.
Right,
too.
exactly. And in that case, the regulations are tricky. It's actually both the country that sails under and the country that the crew is like a citizen of. So then the regulations get tricky.
Well, and then on top of that, it's owned by Miami-based Carnival Cruises, so there's U.S. interests here as well, and no one was exactly sure how to work this out
Yeah.
in court, and it was a pretty novel case.
Yeah, by
in
not
that way.
abandoning ship, he didn't necessarily break laws, but he broke laws. It was
He
really
broke Italian
confusing.
law.
Yeah, he broke Italian law. it was really confusing how that worked. But had it been an American ship, he may not have gotten in the same amount of trouble or the same kind of trouble. I don't know what the rules are here.
I'm sure they're just as strict, if not, but you never know, because American companies tend to skirt rules wherever they can, usually by saying, no, this isn't an American ship. This is a ship out of Portugal,
right.
just to completely get like the laziest laws they can to avoid any potential consequences.
But we'll get more into this. The cruise ship company was able to throw the captain right under the boat. So it was not an issue. Like they were just like, all his fault, and everybody agreed. So they kind of didn't get really in any trouble at all. It was all put on the captain.
Yeah, that's madness.
Yeah.
Someone just hired this captain and put him on our boat. We had nothing to do with it.
Where you even came from?
Captain who? I've never heard of that guy before in my life. We
Look at this
didn't hire
idiot.
him.
He just showed up. Who would hire this guy? Come on.
All right, so there were a lot of heroes that emerged from this night, and they deserve to be remembered. So I wanted to talk about them. William Arlotti was escorting his 5-year-old daughter Diana they were at the lifeboats on one side where they couldn't get off, so they were told to cross the ship, and the dad who had just had a successful kidney and pancreas transplant and was on vacation to celebrate this, was taking his 5-year-old across the ship. She's freaking out, but unfortunately there was sort of this vortex that opened up in the middle of the ship that they fell into, and they were lost. And so there was a witness in court that was there when it happened, and it's so horrible to even imagine, and for him to have to watch, and I don't know, it was heartbreaking, and I cried a lot while I was reading.
Is this everybody? You have a list of it?
I don't have a list of everybody, but I listed all the crew. So I'm gonna do my best with these names. They are Italian. These were the crew members. There was Giuseppe Girolamo, 30-year-old musician, who was on a lifeboat but gave up his seat for a child and did not survive. Sandor Feher, a violinist, and Tomas Alberto Castillo Mendoza, a cleaning supervisor, perished after helping groups of passengers into the lifeboats. 29-year-old bartender Erica Fani Surya Molina gave her life vest to an elderly passenger and drowned. Pictures of her show a very sweet-looking lady with a pretty smile who looked like she enjoyed the heck out of her job. And a waiter named Russell Rebello, who, in spite of a fever that had him asleep in his cabin until the water level reached his bed, heroically stayed aboard to lower the last lifeboats and drowned as well after giving his vest to someone else.
Like the captain didn't.
Captain didn't. And then one of the guests, Maria Trecarici, a vacationer who drowned 12 minutes after her 50th birthday aboard the Concordia, had also given up her spot on the lifeboat. And she and Russell Rebello, the waiter, were both missing for 2 freaking years before finally being found as the ship was being pulled back upright. While waiting for the closure the DNA results on the remains would bring, Rebello's brother joined the family of Trecarici at the site of the wreck, where they were both given permission to take small pieces of rope from the ship in their lost family's memory.
All people who shouldn't have died.
It's horrible.
Right.
Thanks, Captain Shit Tino.
People who did the right thing that night. People who looked out for others and took care of others. It's just so wildly unfair.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people looking out for others also survived. It's unfortunate
That's
people
true.
didn't.
Then, after the sun rises on the shipwreck and Navy divers search for days and weeks for survivors and bodies, making their way through debris and broken glass underwater. Heaps of furniture littered the passageways, making it very difficult to swim and to make it through places and to find people that were lost.
Chris, you're the one with diving experience. Have you done anything outside of like open water?
Yeah, I mean, I've done ice diving, which is probably the most applicable because it's an overhead environment. I mean, I've dived a couple shipwrecks too. I did go into the wheelhouse of a sunken tugboat once.
That's fun.
So the problem with a dive like this is you don't want to get lost and you want to be able to find your way back, right? So usually you're running lines if you're penetrating a wreck or something like that, so you can follow your line back, or if you're in a cave, because if you lose your line, you die because you'll never find your way back to where you can access the surface.
Right.
But when I look at these pictures from the Costa Concordia, It's just a complete soup of shit flown in the water and furniture and papers. And it's like, I don't know how you would ever do that. And I doubt that they were even running lines because the lines would just get snagged on everything.
You'd end up tangling up a bushel of chairs or something.
Yeah.
Probably just memorize some maps and hope for the best.
Maybe you just memorize maps and you have a lot of people working with you. And I don't know how you would even
like
approach this.
People with lights, a chain of people with lights so that you can track back to the last light.
Yeah, like this isn't a vacant ship.
Yeah.
It's just a complete. It's like a garbage pile that happens to be wet. It's like the trash compactor in Star Wars.
Right. I mean, you've got all the regular risks of scuba diving coupled with all the floating furniture and stuff like everybody else's life.
And let's not forget
floating around you.
Boat ghost. I mean, a ship like this is going to have ghosts.
For sure, there's ghosts.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Purser Manrico Giampadroni, and Purser is someone who controls the money on the ship.
Treasurer.
Secretary. That's the word I was looking for. So he had helped a bunch of people into the lifeboats and had gone to comb the decks for survivors when he fell and broke his leg in a submerged restaurant, trapped in the tangle of tables and chairs we were just talking about. So for 36 hours, he waited in the freezing winter water, eating soggy sandwiches and drinking bottles of Coca-Cola as they floated by. He was the last survivor found aboard, and he was found because he banged a frying pan against the wall to alert the rescue team that he was there when he saw them.
Jeez.
I mean, yeah, you make noise when you're trapped somewhere.
Yep.
You want people to find you.
Amazing. He's pictured in the 2012 news article about this with a big smile, expressing his desire to get back to work.
Soggy sandwiches, though. I can't get over it.
So was he a ship worker?
He was basically the treasurer on board.
Okay.
He says the first thing he did upon rescue was to hug the firemen who found him. My heart is warm. So Costa Cruises entirely blamed the captain for taking the ship off course by the time this reaches litigation. The captain's defense blamed Costa Cruises for telling him to go off course as a publicity stunt, and a helmsman, he claims, botched the sail-by maneuver.
That should never have happened in the first fucking place.
Why is the captain not steering the boat when the sophisticated navigational systems are overridden and it's put into manual control?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna override it, you better have some confidence in what you're about to frickin' do.
He was too busy high-fiving his mistress.
And as we talked about in the last episode, the mistress was on the bridge during all of this. They had a bottle of red wine at dinner that night, and they were seen by guests doing that. And also, another crew member on the bridge testified in court that Schettino repeatedly asked him to help navigate because he didn't have his glasses. He left his glasses in his cabin. So he couldn't see. He's probably a little bit drunk from the red wine, and he
We should hire him.
Yeah, he was
should
also
be a
on
part
the
of this
phone.
podcast.
He was on the phone with someone he knew on the island who wasn't on the island at the time, but it is believed that the phone call ended as the ship hit the rocks. So
Yeah.
he's hang up and drive, my dude.
Yep.
We need robot captains.
We
had a robot
that.
Yeah, I know,
He
but
shut it off.
Yeah, one you can't shut off.
He deflated it.
A cyborg with no sex drive.
So
and
like the one from
infinite,
WALL-E?
infinite alcohol tolerance.
Have you watched WALL-E?
Yeah.
The autopilot of the ship that wouldn't let the captain turn it off because.
It's been a while
Yeah.
since I watched WALL-E. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
There you go.
So his mistress served as a witness at the trial. So that was pretty interesting stuff. They were like, there was no affair. Apparently they did have like a 2-week affair. It's like,
Yeah, she testified over and over that there was no affair, and then eventually the judge got her to admit it because they had found her suitcase and bikinis in his stateroom, and she didn't even have a ticket.
Shit was floating around everywhere.
Oh, right, yeah.
Probably floated down the hall
Yeah.
into his stateroom.
and carefully put himself in his dresser. It's pretty, 2 weeks. I mean, that just feels like the Titanic too, right? Like it's just their budding romance got cut short by a horrible shipwreck.
Let me say something controversial. Outside of the context of being a ship captain, this guy's probably fun.
Right? He's down to party.
He likes dresses.
Like Greg said, we should have him on the podcast. It's like, yeah, he probably just wants to drink a bunch of wine and fuck around.
Yeah.
Just
Unfortunately,
don't
the
put
lives-
them in control of 179 lives.
Yeah, like one of the world's biggest cruise ships. Maybe give them a smaller cruise ship to
Don't
start off with.
let them watch your kids. Don't let them babysit your cat or your dog.
Okay. Well, we're gonna
You're scared. You want to go home?
I do. It's dark.
get aboard the ship.
It's dark.
Get aboard the
There's a
ship.
lifeboat in the way.
If you'd have gone back on an hour ago, it wouldn't have been as dark.
But I got
Get
my
back
first officer with me.
We're gonna take a break. I'm gonna push Richard back aboard the ship, and when we're back, we're gonna finish up this episode about the Costa Concordia
and Captain Shit.
sinking and Captain fucking shit-faced fucking shit fuck.
Shitino.
What's Italian for McGee?
I think it's just McGee.
Fine,
No.
Captain Shithead McGee,
No.
but in Italian.
McGeeno.
Back on Giglio, the wreckage is marring the tourist view for another summer. The salvage team admits it will be months before the waters will be clear again.
We lost almost 2 months through the winter period, and then drilling into the granite and the slope of the granite that she's resting on, it's almost 35, 45 degrees in places. And by the end of August, the very first days of September, we're ready for the power buckling operation. So what we have to do before we get permission for that is submit all the documentation to the authorities, and then they can give us a final go-ahead.
But there's no guarantee that the ship can be rolled upright and survive intact. For its former captain, this trial could also last for months, as the court will hear testimony from more than 100 of the former passengers and workers who survived the Costa Concordia disaster. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera, Giglio.
Lager of the Lakes, Bohemian Pilsner. I was coming back and you just talked over me.
You're good.
Am I? Are you sure this time? Can't fucking do anything around
You
here
want me to
without
check? Let me
shitting
check.
on it.
Yeah, you're good.
Anyway, the Lager of the Lakes Bohemian Pilsner is as refreshingly crisp as a morning swim in the Great Lakes. This golden lager sparks thoughts of sandy beaches and freshwater islands. That one's by Bell's.
Yeah. How's it taste?
Easy to drink.
I would like to take this opportunity to read the description of my beer.
Oh,
Are you
please.
guys ready?
No.
What's
Yeah.
your beer?
It's M43 by Old Nation. It's one of my favorites.
No civilian needs an M43.
This civilian needs an
Official
M43.
platform of the What a Disaster podcast.
All right, so this is what Old Nation has to say about M43. Government warning. 1. In accordance to the Surgeon General, women should not drink alcoholic beverages during pregnancy because of the risk of birth defects. 2. Consumption of alcoholic beverages impairs your ability to drive a car, operate machinery, and may cause health problems.
Also, impairs your ability to say the word machinery.
Yep.
Also
As
impairs
evidenced by
your
me.
ability to drive a cruise ship.
Yeah, oh yeah. So these are great beers. You're
Yeah.
welcome, listening audience. Chris has had a LaCroix.
So what happened to our Captain Scatino?
So after trying to foist responsibility onto the
Foist
Costa cruise line and the other people on the bridge. And
Was this like the trial of the century in Italy?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
It was a big fucking deal. And I'm a little shocked that I lost track of this story because I was super interested in it and I looked it up a lot when it first happened. And then I just didn't hear anything else. It just never reached like the outlets that I follow. So I had to look into it and I'm glad I did because it's so interesting and so in depth. Yeah, he's sentenced to 16 years in prison for manslaughter, causing a maritime accident and abandoning ship.
Seriously, fuck that guy.
Only
that
16
guy.
years.
Only 16 years. He there was the potential for up to 32, but
I
he
wish
got
he'd have gotten
half.
every last one of them.
I do too. And I think he should have been charged for the diver who died trying to find people aboard the ship.
It should have been 5 years for every person who lost their life. At least.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before the trial, he was seen partying on the beach with his family, hanging out, just living a life of luxury. So after sentencing, he was quoted as romanticizing his prison cell as no different than a cabin aboard the ship where he first began his career. But he also says things like he wishes he died on the ship too, but he made no moves to do so or to help anyone that was going to die.
We wish you did
So
too.
that's pretty disingenuous. He also is quoted as saying,
I was painted worse than Bin Laden.
So fuck this guy, but that's kind of a good point about his cell.
Right? I was thinking that too. I was afraid to get like,
Except he can't tootle a horn.
It's like, what are you gonna do to me? Make me live in a little tiny cabin?
Right.
Well, so much for Scatino. And so in prison is where he stays.
Yes,
to
he
this
did
day.
appeal his 16-year conviction, but was soundly squashed,
Yep.
thankfully.
yeah. So now we're on the recovery. We got to get this fucking
is
boat out of the water.
fascinating. Okay, so a few things about the salvage. It was the largest salvage operation to date.
Second
ever.
to the Titanic, right? Because the Titanic,
Right?
called
They
the
never
Titanic.
The
salvaged that
Titanic is
one.
where it sunk. It continues
Right?
to be at the bottom
But
of
the
the Atlantic.
Titanic, the name means really big.
It's
It does.
too deep though. They can't salvage it. It's too deep.
They do. I'm amazed
They
at
have
how much
solved it.
stuff
They just
they've-
have not put in the effort to do it yet. How
I mean,
dare
they've
they?
dredged up so much shit from down there. Like
Yeah.
entire walls of the Titanic are
Yeah.
on the shore now.
If they
so-
take it up a piece at a time, it eventually gets salvaged.
That's
True.
that's all. That all has its own set of issues and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, besides that, the Titanic was half the size of the Costa Concordia.
Wow.
So
Why didn't they call this one Titanic?
Titanic
Take
2.
it.
Titanic literally means really big.
That would be bad luck.
But yeah, so
the Isle of Giglio has a very, very delicate and very beautiful and
sensitive.
like there's a lot of variety.
Oh,
there's a lot of-
diverse.
Diverse
Diversity.
flora?
There's diverse flora and fauna in the sea.
Are they called flora and fauna in the sea?
I don't know.
I
They are
think
now.
so.
So, although most fuel and oil was siphoned out quickly after the wreck had happened, thousands of pounds of cleaning chemicals and rotten food remained on board, and probably some just little bits of fuel and oil that were still in there.
Well, thank God they got the fuel and oil. They got the oil.
Well, they don't want it to spill into the reef.
I'm sure that was their concern.
I hope so.
Actually,
I do.
it's probably cheaper to just buy new stuff than to siphon out what's there.
Yeah.
That's probably not a cost-effective solution until you start considering the local fines that you're going to be left.
So, a
fat
huge
with.
part of the ecological recovery effort involved these endangered giant mussels who had very comfortably taken root on the hull of the Costa Concordia. They can each reach up to 3 feet tall and had grown for about the entire 20 months that the ship was there. So each mussel had to be carefully replaced in a safer environment before the ship could be salvaged, which is really kind of sweet.
That's cute. It's nice that they were taking so much care. So
It
did they do a good job overall of containing the hazardous waste?
Yes, they did an amazing job. They were very conscientious of the animals and the reefs and just trying to contain everything and to keep pieces from falling off, which was the biggest concern because of the way the bow was hanging over this underwater rock shelf. There was this fear that as it had sat for 20 months and because it was never designed to take any sort of force from the side, that as they lifted it, the bow would just crack off and fall into the deep water where it couldn't be recovered.
It was. We watched a film called a documentary called Raising the Concordia. It's an hour long, and it kind of goes into the salvage of the Concordia.
Highly recommend. It's
Yeah.
so fascinating, but it's not really anything you can. I mean, we can tell you about it a little bit. We'll abbreviate it, but
It goes into detail.
It's
they talk
so-
about like the hoist they built for it. They talk about the engineering that they did. How much? What they bring in? Like 300 engineers.
from all over the world, from 30 countries, and they also they talk a lot about plans that they had that failed, that they couldn't carry out, and they're great ideas, and it's just amazing to see what they came up
They
with.
probably could have just brought in like 50 guys from downriver to just scrap it.
They would have had that ship taken
Call the
care
boys
of.
from Detroit.
Give them a fucking wagon or a shopping cart to stick the copper in. That place- that thing will
All
be-
the metal would be gone overnight.
They won't know where it went, but that's not really the point, is it?
No, it's true. I mean, and it was really cool because it was one of those situations where nobody sinks ships anymore, right? So they had to start from scratch to figure out how to get this thing out of there. This isn't something they had a whole lot of reference material to work off of, other than mathematics.
Yeah, that's wild. How many cruise ships have sunk in the last 50 years?
Well, you can find lists of all the ships that sunk. And some of them are passenger vessels like ferries or I don't know. the situation seems to be worse with ferries. You don't really see a whole lot of cruise ships sinking. We had the Oceanos, which I talked about in the last episode, which sunk in the 90s. It is another incredible story of a fuck-up captain who abandoned ship, went to prison, and as I mentioned in the last episode, the air rescue efforts were coordinated by the ship's magician and the ship's guitarist. They saved everyone aboard, which is fucking awesome. There was also, I think in the 50s and 60s, there were a few cruise liners that went down, but it's not common. The worst accidents besides cruise ships recently have been ferries with several hundred people aboard.
I dove on a tugboat that sank in 1975.
That's pretty neat, though.
Yeah. The ship cost $612 million to build. The recovery effort cost $1.2 billion.
Billion?
Billion.
Yeah.
It cost twice what it cost to build the ship to drag it out of that.
Wow.
Mike Bloomberg could run for office with that. You know?
Yeah.
Like, that's a big chunk of money.
Yeah.
Each of them or something.
And it wasn't because they wanted the metal and the scrap. It's because they were afraid about the ecological disaster that this would bring if it continued to sit
It
there.
was so close to shore.
And this is all because of one man's ego that this happened. I mean, it's pretty awe-inspiring what one person's stupidity can do to something as massive as a cruise ship or to the United States.
Did they leave all the liquor on board?
Yes, they did.
It's all there?
And that threatened the ecology as well as the cleaning chemicals.
So you could you could sneak onto this boat and like find a bottle of vodka.
Well, probably
That
not
purser might
anymore.
have. He just called it Coca-Cola.
Soggy sandwiches and gin.
Bottles of vodka floating by. I'm not gonna go too into depth with this, but I do kind of want to touch on the recovery because it was such a huge fucking deal.
And real quick, we're going to, if you haven't checked out our social media pages, we're going to have links to all kinds of pictures and stuff. We've got
Our favorite documentaries, yes.
Yep, we've got documentaries, we've got photo galleries, we've got all kinds of cool stuff that we'll be throwing up on our Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter. So be sure and check all that stuff out too.
And
after-
nothing
after
shall
you
be
listen.
graphic, and
Or while
nothing
you're
shall be.
Yeah, no, nothing gross, nothing crass.
Yes.
Maybe a picture of us.
Yeah, if there's a picture of
Maybe
us,
a gross picture of us.
That's as bad as it'll get.
So, in order to upright this sideways wreck, they had to build a pillow of concrete and then construct a series of steel frames the whole way along the ship under the seabed. And it's like 3 football fields long. So, at about 2 miles an hour, they slowly tip this ship over the course of a night, just very gently trying to pull it so as not to put too much strain onto the hull because they're afraid again that it's going to break off and fall into the sea. So they just slowly over the course of like 12 hours put it back upright. And you can watch a time lapse of this and it's super fascinating. So then they've got it upright and the bow is, you can see like the top 4 decks. It's mostly underwater still. So they had constructed basically another ship around the ship that they could inflate and bring it up as soon as it was in the right position. So they had these things that were kind of like shipping crates assembled around it on the sides that they could fill with air and just boost it up. And then
Call them aluminum water wings.
aluminum water wings. So it was taken back eventually once they got it upright, and you could like it's once you see the amount of damage to that one side of the ship that had been underwater, you really get a grasp of the scale of the tragedy, and it is truly amazing that only 33 people lost their lives as a result of this. It looks terrible. So they sailed this back to the port of Genoa where it was built, and it was completely dismantled by 2017. And I think I threw out 1.2 billion, but there are all these different numbers that you see anywhere between 1.2 and $2 billion that this costs.
It's an insane amount of money.
The most
Yeah.
expensive recovery operation in history.
Yep.
And again, it only cost $612 million to build the stupid thing.
That's it, though. You could make it. I could have one tomorrow.
You could have one tomorrow. So I suppose the moral of the story is if you just feel like something's wrong, go to the lifeboats. Don't trust the captain. Don't listen to the crew who is at his behest. Just do what you think you need to do. And the story is infuriating because it was all so fucking preventable. Even if this captain did all the same dumb things that landed the Concordia on the underwater rock shelf, many more people could have been saved if they had have just sounded the general emergency alert right away instead of waiting for an hour. And I can't help but feel that this was a really, really, really big deal that we overlooked a little bit here in the US after it initially happened in 2012. Though the news coverage seemed pretty thorough in Europe, I didn't really see a lot of it here. And when I talked to people about doing this research, and I got super sucked in and I wanted to talk to everybody about it, and it was very, very interesting to me, but they didn't really know what happened either. I'm glad I looked into it. Above all, though, hire better captains.
For sure.
Nah, he was fine.
Well, they certainly won't be able to hire worse captains.
Indeed.
You say that, but I bet they could.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, I'm gonna go apply for a job at Carnival as a ship captain.
Oh man, I will use me as a reference. I was your supervisor on the last boat you worked on.
Oh yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for that, by the way.
The Concordia.
I was the first mate on the Concordia. We had 5,000 crew and
Yeah, a climbing wall.
5,000 crew and passengers on my ship, and there was a climbing wall.
Yeah.
So
That's how you know it. And it didn't sink. So
and a water slide, and it didn't sink. You ever see the news stories about my ship
no,
sinking?
the Concordia is still floating.
Well, it didn't sink.
It did catch fire and float for several days with no power or food.
We got off. We're fine.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to that thing after we left.
It's like a speed.
I know it didn't sink.
Attached to it. Like, see you guys.
All right. That brings us to the end of another episode of the What a Disaster podcast. One with a slightly more depressing tone because it was real.
Check out the show notes. We're gonna have all our references in there. Like
What
all of our
references,
sources.
show notes, and social media pages, so Richard doesn't just send people away from social media. Because
Get away from social media.
You know what? Don't get away from social media. Go engage in our brand. We need it.
Yep.
Chris needs it.
Like, share, subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like
button.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can subscribe to us in 5 seconds. 5, 4,
3, 2,
1.
1.
Are you subscribed? Did you do it?
Yeah, you better be subscribed.
All right.
We're coming to get you if you're not.
Chris,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Every Horror Movie on Netflix.
Yeah, check out his
Thanks for coming.
Podcast.
wildly successful podcast, Captain Big Cast over here.
Thanks for acting aside me in our...
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I think this was a fun exercise. I mean, fun. You know, I use that term loosely because we're talking about horrible real life disaster. But you know, it's always
the
nice.
content is not fun, but the experience.
It's always nice to learn something from a podcast. You know.
Yeah, there's probably a
We're here to
German word
teach.
for enjoying the process of discussing something terrible, and it's probably got a lot of syllables and a lot of.
There probably is.
Yeah. You should look that up, Greg.
I sure will.
And then post it to our social media.
It'll be on our Instagram if I can find it. So just check back every day or two.
Yeah. We do this for a living, so go to our Patreon page.
Okay.
Donate $5.
So you caught all the important stuff, and you can call us 209
781.
9113.
That's us.
That's our phone number.
That's where we're at.
You can call us.
You could call us. I'll answer. First, I'll think you're like spam.
Okay.
So I'll screen the call first.
What he meant to say was you can text us so that we got everything covered, but apparently we didn't.
we
And
didn't
we're
have
leaving.
anything.
Well, I'm leaving. I don't care what these guys do.
I'm
Bye.
texting you.
We're taking over Greg's house.
Send help.